The beast of muddy brain, that knows not its own force, and therefore stands loaded with wooden stone. A mere child guides it with bit and rein. Behold, most wonderful, it gives itself death and wars for pence doled out by kings from its own stores. And if someone rise so this truth be given, it kills him unforgiven. That was written in the 13th century.
People say, I mean, you know, the planet doesn't need human beings, but the human being needs the planet. And people don't seem to have equaled that, yeah?
Nature can correct herself, but a lot of times it's going to take years. Of course, it took us a short time to destroy it.
Collapse of soil as the basic resource has led to decline of societies for the last 12,000 years.
We've got to work out some way of producing clean, nutritious, high-quality food while enhancing the environment, regenerating it, not sustaining it.
The biggest problem in terms of my interests is this lack of an explicit link between agriculture and human health.
We got a hell of a piece of work on our hands here, and as far as I'm concerned, we haven't got a minute to lose. We got to get going.
There are agricultural policies in this country that actually preclude sensible management, let alone ecologically sound management.
We live in the most ecologically illiterate civilization that has ever existed.
It's an uphill battle. In fact, if it were only an uphill battle, it wouldn't be so bad. It's the brick walls that are the consequence of the subsidies and our export policy.
People just don't understand that whole system, and they're not being educated.
Of a country that used to be the Jeffersonian dream about the importance of agrarian culture and that kind of thing, that we went to this tremendous cheap food policy.
When a culture worships at the altar of fatter, bigger, faster, cheaper, that food system mantra will express itself in the population.
Now there we are out there on that pendulum looking back down at the middle and saying, uh-oh, but this, look what we left behind. Look what we sort of ignored for a while and even kind of unlearned is our connection to a healthy nature and a healthy environment.
That's the consequences of what we did to get cheap food.
It's not really providing nutrition to us. It's providing an illusion of nutrition.
Now the battle lines are drawn with the helix and the plow. And someday when we are gone, will they stop and wonder how did we ever need so much? And how did we ever come to touch the dark seed?
If you ask what politicians, what they think the public are really interested in, they'll always say, well, the economy's silly, and health and education and crime. And if you say, well, the environment and agriculture and food, they'll say, get real. But actually, things are changing because agriculture and food is related to health. Actually, it's related, as we heard at our conference, to crime. It's related to everything. And as Lady Eve Balfour, our founder, said, my subject is food, which concerns everyone. It is health, which concerns everyone. And it is the soil, which concerns everyone, and the link between the soil, food and health, whether they realize it or not.
What I was going to talk about was biologically correct agriculture, because I knew that even then we were sentencing 1 out of every 4 people in the United States to have cancer diagnosed at some point in their life. That has now escalated to where in the year 2007, 1 out of every 2 can expect to be told that you have cancer.
You can't stop the truth. We are having more health problems. We are having more struggles.
Obviously, you know, the chemical solution is not the solution. We've had a situation where there's been more
chemicals applied every year since we started this experiment. Every year there's been more. Like, it's gone from 1 million tonnes to 1.1 million tonnes just in the last 14 months that of toxic chemicals that we've thrown on our crops. And never since we started this relatively short experiment of 70 years has there actually been a reduction in pest and disease pressure. You actually don't get a less sustainable scenario.
If you actually saw that apple being sprayed and you saw it dripping off there and then went to eat it later, would you even think about it? And, you know, yeah, they're putting a lot of junk, pesticides, fertilizers on our foods. It has to be affecting us.
When EPA does tests for agricultural chemicals in terms of their effect on people, they test one at a time. When you combine things together, the negative effects are enhanced.
After all of this chemical contamination of food, the very first work looking at the presence of chemicals in our children. So they take 400 school children, American school children, and check the 13 most commonly used farm chemicals, check their bodies for those through, majority was blood test and some hair testing. They couldn't find one child of 14 who didn't have unacceptable levels of all 13 chemicals, not one. And then we see leukemia. Leukemia is linked to chemical residues, and leukemia is a new disease in our kids, and it's now the largest killer of our children.
Biotechnology came about to try to solve problems that we created with our other system. We have these problems we can't solve because we don't ever go back to the basis. We don't go back to, here's what it takes to make this thing work.
In Europe, we hear the constant refrain, genetically modified food is safe, because the Americans have been eating it for years and nobody has died or fallen ill.
We've had our Food and Drug Administration ratify GMOs, genetically modified organisms, for human consumption without any testing, without any readout of what the consequences are.
There's very little in the way of published research, a little more than 20 published peer-reviewed safety studies, and by and large those that have been done by industry are junk. And yet within those, even though they're designed to avoid finding problems, you find serious adverse effects.
It's the single solution for the single problem approach, and we already have tried that and seen the consequences with the pesticide industry. There were no whoopses at the moment, but 20 years later now there are a lot of little whoopses.
I would not like to have to make the decision as to whether a particular genetically modified crop was introduced into the environment or not. I'd have a lot of worries with that.
What's your opinion of BST?
Well, I think it's the wrong way to go. I mean, I totally am opposed to it. When we did this study with all these different people, it was clear from that the cows certainly were not going to benefit. Most farmers weren't. The environment wasn't going to benefit. It was certainly, there was nothing in it for consumers, and there may be things that were detrimental to consumers, particularly little kids. So, to me, it violates many of the principles of sustainability.
It's the dynamic things of nature that we are missing, that we are failing to understand.